Well, it looks like whatever ceasefire there was for any short time between the Saudis and the Houthis is now over. The Houthis are claiming that they've captured thousands of Saudi troops and are holding them as prisoners of war. Now, this seems like a pretty big deal to me because, for the most part, we kind of think of the Houthis as a small sort of insurgent force that's really more effective in holding territory because of their connections to the local communities than they are, sort of an effective conventional military force. At least that's the impression that I've gotten from the last few years. Certainly they're more sophisticated than, your ordinary insurgency group, like Al-Qaeda or something like that, or Al-Nusra. But they seemed, I got the idea that they were more along the lines of their organization, kind of like ISIS was, and that, they were capturing towns and stuff and holding territory, but they weren't really a full, capable and advanced military that really could stand up to a sovereign state such as Saudi Arabia in a conventional battle. However, considering that they've captured, according to them, 3 brigades, and I'm not sure if that's translated properly because they said they have thousands of troops. And since this is being translated from Arabic, perhaps brigade is the wrong term. But that's the term that that's being quoted in the stories. But nevertheless, I doubt that thousands is a mistranslation. Thousands is, quite a lot of troops for some small insurgent group to try and capture. It's certainly something that I don't think ISIS could have accomplished in their heyday when they had their so-called caliphate. Now, of course, in addition to the troops themselves, the Houthis claim that they also captured a lot of the officers who were in command of these troops, and as well as all their equipment. So all of their, presumably their tanks, their armored personnel carriers, their artillery, all of the normal equipment that you would think that would go along with a conventional ground army. Seems to have fallen into the hands of the Houthis now. Now, this is particularly surprising because the Saudis, it's been known, haven't really waged a ground war in Yemen. They've been waging an air war. The Saudis have been flying their planes from Saudi Arabia over into Yemen, bombing Yemen, and then coming back home. The Saudis haven't had, to my knowledge, a huge ground presence themselves. What they've had are sort of local proxy groups that they've been trying to work with, and the Saudis have been coming in with essentially close air support on behalf of them. So then it seems quite strange that the Houthis would even have the opportunity to capture thousands of Saudi troops. Where were these troops? Well, the answer is these troops weren't in Yemen. These were troops stationed in a border region in Saudi Arabia, and the Houthis crossed the border, invaded Saudi Arabia, fought a battle with these guys, and then captured a bunch of POWs and brought them back to Yemen. Or at least this is what's alleged by the Houthis. We have no confirmation yet from anyone but them. We haven't seen any evidence coming out. The Saudis have not denied this, but they're not commenting on it one way or the other. They're just not acknowledging that anything's happened, which seems to me to indicate that this might in fact have happened, and they're a little shell-shocked. And another thing is that even though while we don't have any proof that this happened other than the word of the Houthis, this would be a pretty ridiculous claim to make if you couldn't back it up. This isn't something you can get away with lying about. It's not like when the U.S., bombs a few people in Afghanistan that were most likely civilians, and the U.S. says, oh, those don't worry, those were all Al-Qaeda members. Don't worry about that. That, at least, there's a bit of plausible deniability. The U.S. can sort of, even if, not a lot of people believe them, they can somewhat make the case, okay, yeah, we thought they were Al-Qaeda. We didn't know they were civilians. But in this case, the Houthis can't say, oh, whoops, we thought we captured thousands of troops and it was really only 25 troops. Like thousands, even if it's only 2,000, that's a big claim. And to prove their claims, the Houthis have announced that there will be a press conference tomorrow on Sunday, Sunday local time, I assume, And I believe they said that they will be presenting some of the equipment that they've captured. But I didn't hear anything about them, like, trying to bring out any POWs. But I think that's kind of unethical. I don't think they, countries in modern times will bring out, a POW and say, like, look, see, we won this guy in a battle. He's one of our spoils of war. That might be considered a bit, I don't know. Well, barbaric isn't really the right term, but how about uncouth, shall we say? Now, this is going to have a big impact if this turned out to be true, because I don't know how the Saudis can sort of take this one in the teeth now that if they have in fact lost this major land battle to the Houthis. I don't know how they avoid trying to charge in with some kind of a full-scale invasion to I guess, reclaim their credibility, because the Saudis look like total fools if this is in fact the case. If they let some ragtag band of rebels, as they consider the Houthis to be, to invade their country, pillage their town or pillage a military installation and, capture all these troops. Now, a Saudi invasion of Yemen is something that's much easier said than done. And in fact, if the Saudis thought it was possible at all, they probably would have invaded Yemen, on the ground with ground troops a long time ago. The reason why they didn't do that, and really the reason why they, if this doesn't turn out to be true, why the Houthis were able to capture thousands of Saudi troops, is because Saudi's army is really a paper tiger. The Saudi army is quite feckless. It's made up of conscripts who don't want to fight for the king, who have no faith in their government, who don't want to die, certainly, for their country. And so were the Saudi army ever to engage in combat, they probably would surrender at the first potential opportunity. So I think that's probably what we saw here. I don't think necessarily that the Saudis were vanquished. It's just that they have no will to fight. And, of course, they're very poorly organized, too, I would imagine. Of course, I'm not an expert on those matters, but I can't imagine that the Saudis are particularly well trained, even if they are very well equipped. I think that the arming of the Saudi military is much more a jobs program for Americans than it is a defense program for Saudi Arabia. The defense program for Saudi Arabia is their alliance with the United States. The Saudis have a big military budget and buy a lot of American arms, but that's just more of a way of ingratiating themselves to the American military-industrial complex. It's not really the way that they plan to defend themselves. So therefore, if the Saudis were to escalate the war in Yemen to some greater degree, that would include, a full ground invasion and occupation of the country, that would have to be done most likely by American troops. Sure, there would be Saudi troops maybe in the rear echelons, backing up the Americans, but not on the front lines. They couldn't. They would probably completely collapse if they sent Saudi troops to the front lines of any major conflict. We saw a similar problem in western Iraq when the largely Shia Iraqi military encountered the Sunni ISIS fighters in Sunni majority areas. They didn't have much reason to fight, to defend Sunni towns from Sunni invaders. They didn't really have much interest. Those troops personally, they didn't feel like their country to them. They're basically sort of foreigners in that part of Iraq. So in closing, this latest development with the Houthis capturing supposedly thousands of Saudi troops, if true, I think is meant as a message to the Saudis. They're telling the Saudis that, yes, you can come into our country and bomb us and bomb our people and bomb away. But we can also reach out and touch you. We could come into your country and deal you some humiliating blows as well. The Houthis essentially are winking and nodding at the Saudis and letting them know that they know all too well that the Saudis have a glass jaw. something they may very well exploit in the case of a regional war between the allies of Saudi Arabia and the allies of Iran. I could very well see the Houthis doing quite some damage and perhaps even conquering territory in Saudi Arabia. Were such a war to break out, they certainly would cause the Saudis a significant headache in that case. But if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.